This is Gibraltar Today. We're going to ask now, what is Gibraltarian English and why is it worth studying? And why is it worth studying local authors and their writing and the way that they use Gibraltarian English? A question for Professor Elena Seaone of the University of Vigo. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Elena. You have studied Gibraltar English and its contact with Ianito.
That's right.
In the context of studying different variations of world Englishes, no?
That's right. So I work on world Englishes, that is the differences between British English, American English, Jamaican English, Indian English, and all of a sudden we realize that there's this beautiful variety of English that is spoken in Europe that has not been studied. So we are compiling the Gibraltarian component of the International Corpus of English that has a component of, as I said, American English, British English, Scottish English, etc. So we are compiling the Gibraltarian component.
So it has similarities but also differences to those other Englishes?
Oh yeah, it has differences, like all the varieties of English are different. Gibraltarian English as well, because it has a different pronunciation, it has a different intonation, and also if you look at large numbers of sentences and so on, it has different frequencies. For example, in Gibraltar, the passive is not so frequently used as it is in British English. If you compare parallel corpora, you can see that.
Can you give us an example of passive English being used?
Of course. When you say that this was discovered or the man was called or something, that would be passives. And they are very frequent, of course, in Gibraltar English, but not as much as in British English. And one probability, one reason why that we would have to prove, of course, is because in Spanish we don't use passives at all. So maybe that's the reason why, but we have to prove that.
And people in Gibraltar who are speaking Gibraltarian English also have Spanish in their brains it might have an impact on the way that they speak English.
They are lucky enough to be multilingual. They are not monolingual. So this is why.
You as a linguist, you view this as an advantage.
A great advantage. Everyone wants to be multilingual, right? Bilingual. Speak 3 languages, 4 or 5, the more the better. So yes, you have that richness, and one language influences the other, and that is wonderful.
You were the organizer of a conference this summer, which looked at this. It's the second of its type, held over 2 days at the University of Vigo. Yeah. With researchers from a number of different countries.
In Europe, yes.
All interested in
Gibraltar.
Gibraltar language.
We sent out a call for papers and it was filled immediately. The 2 days were fully booked. We didn't have to extend the deadline or anything like that. And everyone participated, not only giving papers, but after the paper discussion, questions and answers. It was the energy in that room was amazing, and everyone was very, very excited to have this conference being organized after the Cambridge one last year, and it's going to have a follow-up session, a follow-up conference in Switzerland next year. Maybe the following one will take place here in Gibraltar, otherwise in Turin, the Balearic Islands. So there's a number of universities queuing up to organize a conference like that one, because there's so much to be researched in Gibraltar, culture, language, everything.
Is that because it hasn't really been done yet?
No, not really. There has been an interest since the 80s, but it was very impressionistic, like this here and that there, but systematically and in depth, no, it hasn't been done before. So it's under-researched.
And you are one of the people who are very interested in this and are organising other academics, but involving Gibraltarian authors and people who might have something to say on it.
Exactly. We started working on this 10 years ago, but it was only 2 years ago that we started to have an interest in Gibraltarian culture that we didn't know before. We just thought of Gibraltar as a colony of or former colony of the British Isles, and this is so much more than that. So we discovered the local writers, the local culture, the local language, Ianito, and how it is disappearing, which for us is a tragedy as linguists and as speakers of languages. And so this is when we got involved with also writers and GFAMs. We got to know them and so on. So yes, we are contributed in that respect.
Gibraltarians for a multilingual society,
Exactly.
who we speak to from time to time in the show.
Mhm.
So we've heard them say, we've heard the University of Cambridge professors in the studio also saying
Mhm.
that Llanito is dying.
Yes.
And what are your thoughts on that then?
It is dying, unfortunately, and I think that I think it's a pity. Of course, I'm not going to say the opposite. Now I'm speaking as a linguist, but also as a person who has two languages as well, and to lose one of them would be a tragedy, because that is what I am. I come from a background, my history, my ancestors, my family, my culture is bilingual, so I want to keep on being bilingual, and I want my children to be bilingual. So losing one of them for me would be a tragedy. It would be like tearing down the Catedral de Santiago. I come from Galicia, or destroying the rock. Right? It's a legacy. It's part of who I am. So I don't want it to die. So if Llanito dies, a large part of the identity of Gibraltarian people will die with it. It will be a terrible loss, because it's culture. I know we cannot touch it, but we use it every day. We think in those terms. We remember in those terms. And we are where we come from, right? That is what makes you unique. If you don't speak Llanito, what makes you Gibraltarian? That you live in Gibraltar? Anyone can do that. That you eat Gibraltarian food? Anyone can do that. That you are Mediterranean? There are so many cities in the Mediterranean. So what makes you unique? That you speak English and Llanito. So how are you going to get rid of that? For me, I would fight for it if I were a Gibraltarian.
So you've spoken to the why, but what is Llanito for you?
For me, Ianito is a linguistic, it's a language, okay? So for some linguists, it's going to be code switching between Ianito and English, and for others, it's going to be a hybrid language, and for others, a contact language. You call it whatever you want, it's a language, okay? Why? Because it's a marker of identity, it's unique to the Gibraltarian people, no one else can speak Ianito, and also because it's a linguistic means of communication. You can get by, or, bueno, arreglarte con el Ianito. Sí. You can understand, you can, move and comunicar everything. And some people say, it's not a language because it's not written down. Well, almost 50% of the languages in the world are oral means of communication. You don't have to write them down. You don't have to write grammars about them. No.
You don't need a grammar for it to be a language?
No. There is a language that is completely dead, Latin, and it has like thousands of grammars and dictionaries. So what? It's dead anyway. So what are grammars good for? It's like a museum language. Languages are real when you speak them. Then if later on you want to write them and codify them and analyze them, okay, but you don't have to do that.
But there is an interesting movement now, yes. And I know that your work focuses mainly on Gibraltar English. Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing your views on Ianito, because it is, I suppose, a related subject, but it's also one that we're very interested in at the moment because it's a very live conversation for our society. But as part of your work with Gibraltar English, you have asked some 22 authors, mm-hmm. local authors, to produce biographies.
Yes.
Tell us about that book.
Oh, yeah, sure. They're not, authors because they have contributed to the book, but they are people from all walks of life, men and women for all ages. So we ordered them from the oldest to the youngest author, so that you could see the evolution of their biographies, what languages they learned at home, and what kind of attitudes they faced when they went to the UK to study, or when they traveled abroad, and so on, how they feel about languages. But they are all kinds of people, not writers. And every single biography is different, and they are written in their own words, and it's fascinating because they share something. They all want to be multilingual. They all blame a little bit the policies at school, because when they were young, they couldn't speak Spanish. They would be punished if they spoke Spanish, which was what they were taught at home, Ianito Spanish. And so they share all that, and they all lament. If Ianito were to be lost, they would really be sad about it.
So there are common themes.
Oh, very common. Yeah, very many. And they also, we don't ask those questions, but they answer the most challenging questions, which is, what can we do to preserve Ianito? And it's to speak it at home and to somehow introduce it at schools and give it a lot of prestige. Because, because we speak Ianito at home, just at home, it doesn't have any prestige. Yes, it does. What is more important than your communication with your parents and your siblings and your children? Why is speaking at your job more important than speaking at home? That's not true. So it's very important. Just
so-
because it's easy for you doesn't mean that it's not fascinating and
So-
unique.
And yeah, and it's captured in a book then that's published by University of Vigo Press.
Yes.
But let me ask a provocative question, if you don't
Right.
mind me doing so, Elena. What would you say to somebody who's listening and thinks, ¿Quién es esa que viene de fuera para decirnos lo que es Ianito, or what we need to do about it?
Okay, that's a very good question. What I would say is that Ianito is fascinating, that I like it, and I think it's under-researched, and I want to have a look at it and describe it. I'm not here to say what you have to do, the way you have to speak, how you have to legislate it or anything. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a politician, I'm just a linguist, and I think it's very, very interesting. And I think that if it were me coming to Galicia and having an interest on Gallego, I would be very, very flattered, and I would try to help, because that means that what I have, what I am, is really important for other people as well, not only for me. So it's all good. We are not here to impose anything. We can't, and we don't want to, of course.
And you're doing it out of academic interest.
Exactly.
That's your motivation.
It's part of my job, yeah, and also part of my passion, I have to say. Yeah, I love my job, the research on other world Englishes. And now that I've come here many times, and now I feel like at home in Gibraltar. So I kind of love the culture and the people, and I want the best for them as well. Not
Thank
from
you.
a patronizing perspective, but as a friend, If it were me, I would like to. I wouldn't like to lose my language. And I speak to so many people who say exactly the same. People my age who say, "Oh yeah, remember, but now I don't speak English to my grandchildren or my children because they answer in English, and it's so tiring." And I get it. But we have to speak it.
Fascinating talking to you, and hopefully we can do so again.
Hopefully.
Professor Seaone, thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you for having me.
And good luck with the launch of that book
Yep, on
later
Thursday.
this week.
Yep.
We look forward to reporting on that.